The sky stretched wide and clear, a canvas of endless blue broken only by the shimmering heat waves rising from the desert floor. Captain Ray Carter adjusted his helmet, the visor reflecting the sleek silhouette of the F-16 Fighting Falcon parked just a few feet away. Its body gleamed under the morning sun, the jet's angular lines exuding both elegance and raw power. Ray couldn't help but smile. This aircraft was more than just a machine, it was a predator, born to dominate the skies. Today, it would prove its worth yet again. Farther down the airfield, a small squadron of Bay Hawks idled in formation. Painted in muted gray with sharp red accents, they were nimble and agile but noticeably less imposing than the Falcon. Lieutenant Marcus Hill stood by his Hawk, leaning against the fuselage as he watched the Falcon's crew run final checks. "Big brother thinks he's all that," Marcus muttered under his breath, though the admiration in his voice was unmistakable. The mission was a joint exercise, a simulated engagement to test the capabilities of both aircraft in a mock combat scenario. Officially, it was about teamwork and tactics, but everyone knew it was a proving ground. The F-16, America's multi-role fighter jet, was already a legend in military circles. The Hawk, on the other hand, was more humble, designed as a trainer and light attacker. The stakes of this mock battle might not have been real, but for the pilots, pride was on the line. Ray and Marcus had shared drinks and stories the night before, swapping barbs and banter about their respective aircraft. Marcus had joked about the Falcon's reputation. "All flash, no grit," he'd said with a grin, earning a good-natured laugh from Ray. But beneath the surface, both men understood the truth. This exercise would test their skills as much as their planes. As the pilots strapped in and taxied to the runway, the air crackled with anticipation. Ray eased the Falcon forward, its powerful engine rumbling like a caged beast. In his cockpit, the world narrowed to a series of glowing screens and switches, each designed for precision and efficiency. The Falcon's targeting systems were state-of-the-art, its controls responsive to the slightest touch. Ray had flown it countless times, yet the thrill of taking off never faded. The Hawks launched in quick succession, climbing sharply into formation. Marcus felt the familiar pull of gravity against his body, his Hawk nimble under his control. "All right, boys," his voice crackled over the comms. "Let's show them what we've got." The engagement began with a simple scenario. The Hawks were tasked with defending a simulated convoy crossing an imaginary border. The Falcon, in this exercise, was the aggressor, aiming to breach their defenses. It was a classic test of speed and strategy, pitting the Hawks' teamwork against the Falcon's raw power. Ray streaked across the sky, scanning his radar as he approached the engagement zone. He knew the Hawks would try to lure him into a close-quarters dogfight, where their agility could even the odds. But Ray had no intention of playing their game. "Let's see how you handle this," he murmured, his fingers dancing over the controls. A warning beep filled Marcus's cockpit as the Falcon locked onto his wingman. "Brake right," he called, watching his comrade peel away just as a simulated missile streaked past. Marcus pulled his Hawk into a sharp climb, trying to flank the Falcon, but the jet was already moving, its afterburners blazing as it looped around for another pass. The difference in speed was palpable. While the Hawks maneuvered with the grace of dancers, the Falcon moved like a predator, swift, decisive, and relentless. Marcus gritted his teeth, his hands tight on the controls as he tried to anticipate Ray's next move. "Stick together," he barked to his team. "Force him to split his focus." Ray smiled at their persistence. The Hawks were doing everything right, working as a team to cover each other's vulnerabilities. But the Falcon didn't need a second chance. He pushed the throttle forward, closing the distance in seconds. A sharp turn, a quick lock, and another Hawk was down, its cockpit flashing red to signal a simulated kill. "Damn it," Marcus hissed, his frustration mounting. He was down to 2 wingmen, and the Falcon showed no signs of tiring. Yet he couldn't deny a grudging respect for Ray's skill. The man flew like he was born in the cockpit, every movement precise and deliberate. The exercise dragged on, the Hawks fighting valiantly to hold their ground. They managed a few clever feints, forcing Ray into defensive maneuvers, but the Falcon's superior technology made recovery almost effortless. Marcus's own Hawk shuddered under the strain of repeated turns and climbs, its smaller engine struggling to keep pace. Finally, it was down to the last engagement. Marcus had lost both his wingmen, leaving him alone against the Falcon. The simulated convoy was minutes from the border, and Marcus knew he had to make a stand. He pulled his hawk into a tight loop, trying to position himself above the Falcon. For a brief moment, he had the advantage, his targeting system beeping as it locked onto Ray's jet. But the moment didn't last. With a burst of speed, Ray rolled the Falcon out of the hawk's sights, diving low before climbing sharply. The maneuver was dazzling, leaving Marcus scrambling to adjust. Before he could react, his cockpit flashed red. The Falcon had locked onto him, and the comms crackled with Ray's voice. "Nice try, Marcus. You almost had me." As the exercise ended and both aircraft returned to base, Marcus felt a mix of disappointment and awe. He climbed out of his cockpit, watching as Ray's Falcon taxied to a stop nearby. The man himself emerged moments later, pulling off his helmet to reveal a triumphant grin. "Good fight," Ray said, extending a hand. Marcus shook it, his grip firm despite the sting of defeat. "You flew well," Ray added. "The hawk's a solid bird. But the Falcon, well, it's in a league of its own." Marcus laughed, the tension breaking. Yeah, rub it in. But don't get too comfortable. Next time, I'll have your number." Ray nodded, his smile never fading. "I'll be waiting." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the airfield in shades of gold and amber, the two men walked toward the hangars, their rivalry tempered by mutual respect. The exercise might have been over, but the lessons learned would stay with them. Pilots bound by their love of flight, their machines, and the endless challenge of mastering the skies. The morning after the exercise, the debriefing room buzzed with quiet conversation. Pilots gathered around a central screen displaying recorded footage of the previous day's engagement. Marcus Hill sat toward the back, arms crossed, his expression a mix of frustration and determination. Ray Carter, ever composed, stood at the front with a pointer in hand, his relaxed demeanor belying the precision of his critique. "Let's start here," Ray said, pausing the footage at a moment where Marcus's hawk had broken formation to engage. The room fell silent. "This maneuver," he pointed, "was bold, but it cost you your defensive coverage. By separating, you gave me an opening to neutralize your wingman." Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tight. "I had to take the risk. If we stayed grouped, you'd have picked us off anyway." Ray nodded. "True, but there's a balance. Your strength is in coordination, forcing me to respond to multiple threats. When you break that, you're playing into my hands." The conversation that followed was professional, but the tension between the two pilots simmered. For Marcus, the exercise had felt like fighting an uphill battle. The Hawks were agile and reliable, but the Falcon was in a different league. Its speed, advanced radar, and sheer power made it seem untouchable. Yet Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he could have done, should have done. Later that day, Marcus found himself on the flight line, staring at his hawk. The jet was sleek, almost elegant, but it lacked the ferocity of the Falcon. A maintenance crew worked nearby, their voices blending with the hum of distant aircraft. Marcus ran a hand along the hawk's fuselage, his mind replaying the engagement. What could he have done differently? How could he have turned the tide? The answers weren't easy, but Marcus wasn't the type to back down. He spent the next few days poring over data, analyzing every maneuver and decision. He studied the Falcon's capabilities, learning its strengths and weaknesses. If he was going to face Ray again, he needed a strategy, something unexpected. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. A second exercise was announced, this time with a more complex scenario. The Hawks were tasked with defending a series of simulated ground targets against a coordinated assault led by the Falcon. It wasn't just about Marcus and Ray now, it was a full squadron operation. But everyone knew where the real battle would be fought, in the skies between the two rival pilots. As the exercise began, Marcus felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. He and his wingmen took off, their hawks forming a tight V formation as they climbed toward the engagement zone. The plan was simple: use the terrain to their advantage, forcing the Falcon into close quarters where the hawks could exploit their maneuverability. Ray, however, was already one step ahead. His Falcon soared high above, its radar sweeping the area with precision. He spotted the hawks' formation quickly, and a faint smile crossed his lips. "Nice try," he muttered, adjusting his heading to intercept. Marcus knew Ray would try to outmaneuver them, using the Falcon's speed to dictate the fight. But this time, Marcus had a plan. He ordered his team to break formation, scattering into pairs that dove into the hills below. The low altitude limited Ray's radar advantage, forcing him to rely on visuals and calculated guesses. For a moment, the skies were eerily quiet. Then, a sharp warning tone filled Marcus's cockpit. The Falcon had locked onto one of his wingmen. Marcus banked hard, pulling his Hawk into a steep climb. He spotted Ray's jet streaking across the sky, its sleek frame catching the sun as it lined up for another simulated kill. "Not this time," Marcus whispered, pushing his Hawk into an aggressive dive. He'd studied Ray's patterns, his tendency to prioritize high-value targets. This time, Marcus used that to his advantage, positioning himself where he knew Ray would least expect. The Hawk's targeting system beeped as Marcus locked onto the Falcon. His thumb hovered over the trigger, but Ray was already reacting. The Falcon rolled sharply, pulling into a climb that left Marcus scrambling to follow. The two jets twisted through the sky, their engines roaring as they pushed the limits of speed and endurance. Ray's voice crackled over the comms. "Nice move, Marcus. Almost had me." Marcus grinned despite himself. "Almost doesn't count, does it?" The battle raged on, each pilot pushing their aircraft to the edge. Ray's Falcon remained dominant, its superior power and technology evident with every maneuver. But Marcus's tactics had improved, his understanding of the Falcon's weaknesses allowing him to stay in the fight longer than before. As the exercise neared its conclusion, Marcus and Ray found themselves alone in the skies. The rest of the Hawks had been neutralized, their pilots watching from the ground as the two rivals dueled. Marcus's Hawk was battered, its systems struggling to keep up. Ray's Falcon, though still formidable, showed signs of wear, minor, but enough to prove the fight had been hard-fought. Marcus pulled his Hawk into a final climb, the sun at his back as he lined up for one last shot. He knew it was risky, the Hawk's engine strained against the steep ascent, and Ray would see the move coming. But Marcus had no choice. If he was going down, he'd go down fighting. Ray, ever calm, saw the maneuver and responded instantly. The Falcon surged forward, its afterburners flaring as it closed the gap. For a brief moment, the two jets were almost nose to nose, their pilots locked in a battle of wills as much as skill. Then it was over. Marcus's cockpit flashed red, signaling a simulated hit. The Hawk shuddered, its systems registering the kill. Ray's voice came over the comms, steady and triumphant. "Good fight, Marcus. You made me work for it." Marcus exhaled, his grip loosening on the controls. "Next time," he said, a note of defiance in his voice. "Next time, I'll have you." Ray laughed, the sound carrying across the comms like a challenge. "I'll hold you to that." As they returned to base, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment despite the loss. He'd come closer than ever to besting the Falcon, pushing both himself and his aircraft to their limits. The Hawks might not have won the day, but Marcus knew the fight wasn't over. The sky was vast, and there would always be another battle, another chance to prove his worth.